I never believed in ghosts. Not the kind people talk about in movies. Not the kind that whisper or walk through walls. But the night my son started talking to someone who was not there, something inside me cracked in a way I still don't fully understand. It started quiet. That's how most disasters start. Quiet enough that you tell yourself it's nothing. Quiet enough that you don't want to be the person who makes a big deal out of it. I remember standing in the hallway, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold in my hand. It was late. Too late for a kid to be awake. And I heard my son's voice coming from his room. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't laughing. He was talking. Soft. Careful. Like he didn't want to wake someone sleeping beside him. I stood there, frozen. Every parent knows their child's voice. You know when something is off. You feel it before you understand it. At first, I thought he was on his phone. Kids talk to screens all the time. That's normal now. So I almost walked away. Almost. Then I heard him say, "I miss you too." My chest tightened. Because there was a pause after that. A long one. The kind you leave when someone else is talking. And then he nodded. I could see the shadow of his head moving under the light from his desk lamp. He nodded again. Like he was listening. That was the moment fear settled in. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that sits deep in your gut and doesn't ask permission. I knocked on the door. Just once. He jumped. Quick. Too quick. "Dad," he said. His voice was shaky. Like he'd been caught doing something wrong. I opened the door slowly. His room looked normal. Bed unmade. Books stacked crooked on the desk. The same old posters on the wall he'd had for years. But there was no phone in his hand. "Who were you talking to?" I asked. He looked past me, then back at his bed, then at the floor. "No one," he said. That was the first lie, and I knew it right away. I didn't push him that night. That's another mistake parents make. We think silence will protect our kids. Sometimes silence just gives fear more room to grow. I told him to get some sleep. I turned off the light. I closed the door. But I didn't sleep. I lay next to my wife, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. Every creak sounded louder. Every shadow felt heavier. My wife asked me what was wrong. I told her it was nothing. That was my second lie. Back then, our family looked solid from the outside. A normal American family. Nothing special. Nothing broken. At least, that's what we told ourselves. I worked long hours. Not because I loved my job. Because I believed that's what a man was supposed to do. Provide. Protect. Keep things steady. My wife held the house together in ways I never fully noticed until it started falling apart. She remembered birthdays. Doctor appointments. Little details that make a family feel alive. And my son, he was quiet. Smart. Sensitive in a way that made me proud and scared at the same time. His mother said he felt things deeply. I used to say he just needed to toughen up. I regret that now. The next morning, he didn't come down for breakfast. That wasn't like him. I found him sitting on his bed, staring at the wall. The same wall he'd been talking to the night before. "Who is she?" I asked. He didn't look at me. "She listens," he said. Those two words hit harder than any scream could have. I asked him again. Who she was. Where he met her. Why he was talking to her. He finally looked up at me then. His eyes were red. Not from crying. From holding it in. "She died," he said. "But she still comes back." I laughed. I hate admitting that. But I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my brain couldn't handle the fear. So it chose denial instead. I told him people don't come back after they die. I told him he was imagining things. I told him he needed to stop. That was my third mistake. He shut down after that. Completely. No arguing. No tears. Just a wall between us that I helped build. My wife noticed the change before I did. She always did. She asked him gentle questions. She sat with him at night. She listened. And slowly, he started talking again. But not to me. That's when the cracks in our family started to show. Not all at once. Just little lines at first. Easy to ignore. My wife said we needed help. I said we didn't need strangers in our business. She said our son was scared. I said boys go through phases. She said something was wrong. I said everything was fine. I was wrong. The woman my son talked to had a name. I didn't learn it until much later. And when I finally did, everything we thought we knew about our family came undone. Because she wasn't just dead. She was connected to us. And the truth about how. That truth would tear us apart in ways I never saw coming. After that night, the house didn't feel the same anymore. Nothing loud had changed. No doors slammed. No voices were raised. But something invisible had moved in with us, and every room felt heavier because of it. My son stopped meeting my eyes. Not in a disrespectful way. More like he was afraid of what I might see if I looked too long. He still went to school, still ate dinner, still said, "Yes, sir," and "No, sir." But the boy I knew was drifting somewhere I couldn't follow. I started coming home earlier. Not because I suddenly became a better father, but because fear has a way of changing priorities real fast. One evening, I heard him again. Same soft voice, same careful pauses. Only this time, I didn't knock. I stood outside his door and listened. "I told him you're real," my son whispered. "He just doesn't get it yet." There was that pause again. That awful, silent space where no one should be answering. "I know," he said. "I know you're not supposed to be here." My hands started shaking. I pressed my palm against the wall, grounding myself like I'd seen people do in movies. It didn't help. I opened the door. He didn't jump this time. Didn't look scared. He just looked tired. "Dad," he said quietly. I asked him again who she was, why she came, why he kept talking to someone who wasn't there. He sighed, like someone much older than his years. "Her name is Grace," he said. That name hit me harder than I expected, not because I recognized it, but because of how he said it. Careful, respectful, like you talk about someone you love. "She died a long time ago," he went on, "but she knows things about us." That's when my wife stepped in. She had been standing behind me, silent, listening. "What kind of things?" she asked gently. My son looked at her, really looked at her. His lips trembled. "She knows why you cry in the bathroom," he said. My wife froze. The room went dead quiet. No clock ticking, no house noises, just breathing. "She knows about the baby," he added. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. My wife hadn't told me everything. I knew that now. I'd always known there were pieces missing. But hearing it come from my son's mouth, through a dead woman, that broke something in me. My wife sat down on the bed, slow, careful, like her legs might give out. "What else does she know?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "She knows about you too," he said. I wanted to scream. I didn't. I couldn't. "She says you're angry because you're scared," he continued. "That you don't talk about the past because you think it'll swallow you." My chest burned. Because that was true. I told him enough was enough. I said this wasn't healthy. I said we were getting help. He nodded. Didn't argue. Didn't cry. That scared me more than anything. The therapist said it might be grief, or stress, or an imaginary friend taken too far. I wanted that answer. Needed it. But my son kept talking to Grace. Not less. More. He'd leave space at the table for her. He'd whisper goodnight to the empty hallway. He'd ask us not to sit in her spot on the couch. My wife played along at first. Said it helped him feel safe. I couldn't do it. Every time I tried, my skin crawled. One night, I snapped. I told him Grace wasn't real. That she never was. That she never would be. He looked at me with a kind of hurt I'll carry forever. "She died because of us," he said. I laughed again. That stupid, scared laugh. "What are you talking about?" I asked. He stood up, walked past me, and said something that changed everything. "She died in this house." The air felt thick, like it was pressing against my ears. "That's not true," I said. It came out weaker than I wanted. He stopped at the doorway. "She was a girl," he said. "She lived here before me." I felt dizzy. My wife started crying. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet, like she'd been holding it in for years. I turned to her, asked her what he was talking about. She couldn't look at me. That's when I realized the betrayal wasn't coming from my son. It was coming from silence, from secrets, from all the things we never said because we thought they were buried. That night, my wife told me about Grace. Not the ghost, the girl. She had lived here years ago, before we bought the house, before we started our family. There had been an accident, a fire, a locked door, a child who didn't make it out. The sellers never told us. The records were quiet. The past was hidden under fresh paint and new walls. My son had found her old room, a space behind the basement wall we never noticed. Inside were drawings, a name, a story, and somehow, in a way I still don't understand, he felt her. He listened, and instead of protecting him, I denied him. That's when the real divide in our family began. Not because of a ghost, but because of guilt. Because my wife believed our son, and I didn't. Because I believed facts mattered more than feelings. And I was wrong. Grace didn't just haunt my son. She haunted our marriage, our trust, our ability to face the truth. And the more I tried to erase her, the deeper she rooted herself into our lives. I didn't know it yet, but the hardest part wasn't believing in Grace. It was accepting what she represented. The past doesn't stay buried just because you refuse to look at it. And soon, It would demand more than fear. It would demand sacrifice. After my wife told me about the girl who died in this house, nothing felt solid anymore. The walls didn't feel like walls. The floors didn't feel steady. It was like the house itself had been holding its breath for years, waiting for someone to finally say her name out loud. Grace. I said it once, quietly, when I was alone in the kitchen. It felt strange on my tongue, like a word that had been waiting for me, even though I didn't know it. My son heard me. I didn't know he was standing there. She likes when you say it, he said. I turned around so fast I almost dropped the glass in my hand. Likes? I asked. He nodded. She says it makes her feel real. That word again. Real. I wanted to tell him none of this was real, that it was all in his head. That kids imagine things when they're scared. But I didn't say any of that. Because the truth was, I was scared too. That week, things started happening in the house. Small things. Easy things to explain away if you wanted to. Cabinet doors left open. Lights flicking on by themselves. Cold spots in rooms that had always been warm. My wife noticed them too. I could tell by the way her eyes followed every sound. By how she hesitated before turning corners. We didn't talk about it much. Fear has a way of making couples quiet. At night, my son slept with his door open. He said Grace didn't like closed doors. Sometimes I'd wake up and hear footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Careful. Like someone didn't want to wake the house. I told myself it was the pipes. The wood settling. My own imagination getting the best of me. But deep down, I knew better. One night, I followed the sound. I stepped into the hallway barefoot, the floor cold under my feet. The air felt heavier there, like it was harder to breathe. I saw my son standing near the basement door. Go back to bed, I whispered. He shook his head. She wants to show you something, he said. Every instinct in me screamed to say no, to turn around, to pretend none of this was happening. But I followed him. The basement light flickered as we went down the stairs. Each step creaked under our weight. The smell down there was damp, old, like something forgotten. He led me to the far wall, the one I'd never really paid attention to. There, he said. I didn't see anything at first. Just concrete, paint peeling in places. Then I noticed the outline. A door-shaped shadow, too straight to be natural. We pried it open together. The wood groaned like it was angry about being disturbed. Inside was a small room. Bare. Cold. Crayon drawings covered the walls. Stick figures. A girl with long hair. A house on fire. And one word, written over and over again. Grace. My knees gave out. I had to sit down. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't stress. This was history. This was real. She was scared, my son said softly. She says no one came when she yelled. My chest burned. I felt like I was going to throw up. She says she waited, he went on. And waited. I wanted to cover my ears. To make it stop. But parents don't get that luxury. That night, I dreamed of fire. Of smoke filling my lungs. Of a small hand pounding on a locked door. I woke up screaming. My wife held me. For the first time in years, she really held me. I should have told you, she whispered. I was afraid. I understood that fear now. The next day, our son stopped going to school. He said Grace didn't want him to leave. That's when panic set in. This wasn't just a story anymore. This was controlling him, shaping his world. I called a priest, a counselor, anyone who might have answers. Most of them told me the same thing. Children process trauma in strange ways. Imagination can feel real, but none of them stood in that hidden room. None of them saw the drawings. Grace wasn't just haunting the house. She was asking for something, and my son was listening. One evening, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. She says she's cold, he whispered, and lonely. I asked him what she wanted. He hesitated. She wants you to say you're sorry, he said. That broke me. Sorry for what? For living here? For not knowing? For surviving? I stood in that basement alone later that night. The house silent above me. I'm sorry, I said out loud. My voice cracked. I didn't know. The air felt warmer. Just for a moment. But it wasn't enough. Because some wounds don't heal with words. Some demand truth. And some demand something much harder. After I said I was sorry in that basement, I expected something to change. Some sign. Some peace. Something that told me I had done the right thing. Instead, the house grew louder. Not with noise. With presence. It felt like we were no longer alone, even when the rooms were empty. Like someone was always standing just behind you, close enough that you could feel their breath, but never turn fast enough to see them. My son changed after that night. He stopped acting like a kid who was scared. He started acting like someone with a responsibility. He would wake up early and set an extra plate on the table. He'd whisper before speaking, even when no one else was around. And he stopped smiling the way he used to. When I asked him what was wrong, he said something that still echoes in my head. "She's tired of waiting." Those words landed heavy. Waiting for what? For who? My wife and I argued more during those days than we ever had before. Not loud fights. Quiet ones. The kind that leave deeper cuts. She said Grace needed acknowledgement. Closure. Respect. I said our son needed boundaries. Protection. Reality. We were both trying to save him, but we were pulling in opposite directions. One night, my wife lit a candle in the basement. Just one. She said it was for remembrance. For kindness. I told her it was dangerous. That we were inviting something we didn't understand. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You weren't there when he cried himself to sleep," she said. "You didn't hear what he hears." That hurt, because it was true. That candle burned low all night. The flame steady. Too steady. The next morning, the wax had melted into the shape of a child's hand. I wanted to throw it away. My wife asked me not to. That was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't just about Grace anymore. This was about faith. About guilt. About the stories we tell ourselves to survive pain. My son started drawing again. Pictures of a girl holding hands with a boy. Pictures of a door opening. One drawing scared me more than the rest. It showed 3 figures. A girl, a boy, and a man standing behind them. The man had no face. "That's you," my son said when I asked him about it. I laughed nervously. "Why don't I have a face?" I asked. He shrugged. "She says you don't see yourself yet." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the fire. About the locked door. About the man who owned this house before us. What kind of person ignores a child screaming for help? And then the thought hit me. What if he didn't ignore her? What if he thought someone else would handle it? What if he told himself it wasn't his responsibility? That scared me more than any ghost ever could. Because that sounded familiar. The house began reacting to my moods. I swear it did. When I was angry, doors slammed. When I was quiet, the air felt thick. When I prayed, something I hadn't done in years, the lights flickered. My son told me Grace didn't like when I prayed. She says it makes her feel pushed away, he explained. That's when fear turned into anger. I told him enough was enough. That whatever this was, it was crossing a line. He cried then. Hard. The kind of crying that comes from deep inside. She doesn't want to hurt us, he said. She just wants someone to stay. Stay? That word sat between us like a loaded gun. Because I knew what staying could cost. My wife begged me to stop fighting it. To let things unfold naturally. I couldn't. I started researching the house. Old records. Newspaper archives. I found the article. A small fire. Barely mentioned. A child pronounced dead at the scene. Cause. Smoke inhalation. No charges filed. The man who lived here moved away shortly after. Changed his name. I stared at that article for hours. Grace didn't die because of fire. She died because of neglect. Because someone chose comfort over courage. And suddenly, I understood why she spoke to my son. He listened. He stayed. That terrified me. One night, I heard my son talking again. But this time, his voice sounded strained. No, he said. I can't do that. I ran to his room. He was standing in the corner, shaking. She wants me to promise, he whispered. Promise what? I asked. That I won't leave her, he said. Ever. That was the line. I pulled him into my arms. Held him tight. No, I said firmly. You don't owe anyone that. The room went ice cold. The lamp shattered. My wife screamed. And in that moment, belief stopped being a question. Because something in that house was angry. And it wasn't my son. After the lamp shattered, the house went silent. Not peaceful silent. The kind of silence that presses on your ears and makes your heart pound louder than it should. My son clung to me like he was afraid I might disappear if he let go. His whole body was shaking. Not from cold. From fear. My wife stood frozen in the doorway, her hands covering her mouth. Her eyes were wide, glassy, like she was watching something she couldn't unsee. We didn't talk about what happened that night. Not right away. We cleaned up the glass. We tucked our son into bed. We left the light on, even though he hadn't needed it since he was little. When he finally fell asleep, my wife and I sat at the kitchen table until morning. Neither of us touched the coffee in front of us. I think we should leave, she said quietly. I knew what she meant. The house, not the conversation. I rubbed my face with my hands. My head felt heavy. My chest felt tight. We can't just run, I said. She looked at me with tired eyes. "We're not running," she said. "We're protecting him." That hurt, because I'd always believed that was my job. But the truth was, I didn't know how to protect my son from something I couldn't see. The next few days were a blur. My son stayed close to us, like a shadow. He didn't talk to Grace anymore. At least, not out loud. But I could tell she was still there. He'd pause in the middle of sentences, tilt his head like he was listening. Sometimes he'd smile sadly at nothing. I asked him if she was angry. He nodded. "She says you don't understand her pain," he whispered. "She says you're just like him." I knew who he meant. The man who owned the house before us. The man who didn't open the door. That comparison cut deep. I spent hours in the basement after that, just sitting, listening to the hum of the house. I tried talking to Grace again, apologizing, explaining. Nothing happened. No warmth. No cold. No sign. Just silence. And somehow, that felt worse. One night, my son woke us up screaming. Not crying. Screaming. We ran to his room. He was standing on the bed, pointing at the corner. "She's mad," he yelled. "She says you're lying." I grabbed him, held him tight. "There's no one there," I said. I don't know who I was trying to convince. The windows rattled. The house groaned like it was in pain. My wife broke down then. She fell to her knees, sobbing. "Please," she whispered to the empty room. "Please leave him alone." The shaking stopped. That's when I understood something terrifying. Grace wasn't haunting the house. She was attached to my son. And if she left, she'd have to let go. The next morning, my son refused to eat. He sat at the table, staring at his plate. "She says she's scared you'll take me away," he said. That confirmed it. Leaving the house wouldn't fix this. It might make it worse. I called a child psychologist who specialized in trauma. Not ghosts. Just pain. She listened to everything. Didn't laugh. Didn't judge. She said something I'll never forget. "Children sometimes carry pain that doesn't belong to them," she said. "They try to heal wounds adults left open." That was Grace. A wound left open. The psychologist suggested grounding. Routines. Boundaries. No talking to Grace. No rituals. No acknowledgement. I agreed. My wife hesitated, but she agreed too. That night, I sat with my son until he fell asleep. "You don't have to carry her anymore," I told him softly. "It's not your job." Tears slid down his cheeks. "She doesn't want to be alone," he whispered. Neither did he. That's what broke my heart. Because in trying to save a dead girl, my son was losing himself. Around midnight, the power went out. The house plunged into darkness. I heard my son's door open. I ran. He was gone. I found him at the top of the basement stairs. "She called me," he said. His eyes looked distant. Not scared. I grabbed him just as the basement door slammed shut on its own. The air turned freezing cold. I held my son and screamed for help. Not to God. Not to Grace. To myself. To the father I was supposed to be. "Let him go," I shouted into the darkness. "He's a child." The pressure in the room lifted. Just a little. My son collapsed in my arms, sobbing. "She's crying," he said. "She says she didn't mean to hurt us." That night, I realized something important. Grace wasn't evil. She was desperate. And desperation can destroy anything if it isn't faced. Even a family. After that night in the basement, I stopped pretending I had control. I was a father standing in the dark, holding a shaking child, realizing that love alone doesn't always protect you from what's broken. My son slept in our bed for the next few nights. Not because he asked, because none of us wanted to be alone. He curled up between us like he used to when he was little, his back rising and falling as he breathed. Every time he moved, my heart jumped. I stayed awake most of the night, listening. Not for footsteps, not for voices, for silence. Grace didn't show herself again after that night. At least not in ways we could see. But her absence felt loud. My son became quiet in a different way. Not withdrawn. Thoughtful. Like someone who had seen something too big and didn't yet know how to explain it. He stopped drawing. Stopped talking to empty spaces. But sometimes I'd catch him staring out the window, his eyes far away. "She's sad," he told me once. Not scared. Not angry. Just sad. That broke me more than fear ever did. Because sadness doesn't feel dangerous. It feels human. My wife and I finally started talking again. Really talking. About Grace. About the house. About the things we never told each other because we thought silence was safer. She told me she'd known about the fire before we bought the place. Not all of it. Just rumors. She didn't tell me because she didn't want to scare me. Didn't want to seem dramatic. I told her I'd always been afraid of being weak. of admitting I didn't have answers. We cried together that night. Not because of ghosts. Because of regret. A few days later, my son asked me something I wasn't ready for. "Dad," he said, "do you think people who die feel lonely?" I didn't rush to answer. "I think they feel whatever they felt before," I said slowly. "And sometimes, they need to be remembered." He nodded. "She doesn't want to be forgotten," he said. That was it. Grace wasn't holding on because she wanted to hurt us. She was holding on because no one had ever said her life mattered. The world moved on. The house got sold. The walls got painted. And a child became a secret. That realization hit me hard. I started learning about her. Not the ghost. The girl. I found old school records. A class photo. She had a gap between her teeth. A shy smile. The kind of face you don't forget once you see it. I showed it to my son. "That's her," he whispered. Not excited. Not afraid. Just sure. We decided to do something simple. Something human. We cleaned the hidden room. Not erased it. We framed one of her drawings. The one of the house, before the fire. We placed it in the hallway. Not as a shrine. As a reminder. "This doesn't mean she can stay," I told my son. "It just means she's seen." That night, the house felt lighter. Not warm. Not happy. But lighter. My son slept in his own bed again. The light off. The door open. I sat on the floor outside his room until he fell asleep. Around 2 a.m., I felt it. A presence. Not in the room. In me. A memory that wasn't mine. Smoke. Heat. Fear. A door that wouldn't open. I whispered into the dark. "You didn't deserve that." The pressure in my chest eased. I don't know if Grace heard me. I don't know if it matters. What matters is that my son slept through the night. Peacefully. Days turned into weeks. The house returned to normal rhythms. No flickering lights. No cold air. But we were changed. My son became more sensitive. Kinder. He'd stop to help strangers. Ask questions most kids don't think to ask. My wife and I learned to speak honestly. Even when it was uncomfortable. As for me, I stopped running from the past. Grace taught me something I never expected to learn from a child who wasn't mine. Pain ignored doesn't disappear. It waits. And sometimes, it chooses the most gentle soul in the room to speak through. I made a promise after that. To listen more. To stay present. To open doors when someone is knocking. Even if I'm afraid of what's on the other side. Because silence can kill. And being seen can save. People think that once something like that ends, life snaps back into place. Like a switch flips. Like the fear packs its bags and leaves quietly. That's not how it works. Grace didn't slam doors on her way out. She didn't make some final appearance. She didn't say goodbye. She faded. And when she did, she left behind a silence that felt different from before. Not heavy. Not threatening. Just honest. The kind of silence that makes you hear yourself more clearly. My son went back to school. At first, I walked him to the bus every morning. Not because he asked. Because I needed to see him get on safely. He didn't talk much about what happened. Kids don't always have the words adults want. But sometimes, in the car, he'd say things that told me it was still there, living quietly inside him. "Dad," he said once, staring out the window, "do you think houses remember people?" I thought about it. "I think people remember people," I said. "And houses just hold the echoes." He nodded like that made sense. At night, I started noticing the little things I'd ignored before all this. The way my wife rubbed her thumb against her ring when she was anxious. The way my son checked locks twice before bed. Trauma doesn't vanish. It just learns to be quiet. My wife and I talked about moving again. Not because we were scared anymore, but because we had changed. This house had been a teacher. A painful one. But not every lesson is meant to last forever. Before we made any decisions, my son asked to show me something. He took me to the hallway where we had hung Grace's drawing. "Can we keep it?" he asked. "Even if we move?" I didn't answer right away. I studied the picture. The crooked lines. The simple hope inside it. "Yes," I said finally. "But not as a memory of fear." "As what?" he asked. "As proof," I said. "That being seen matters." He smiled then. A real smile. The kind I hadn't seen in months. That night, I dreamed again. Not of fire. Of a girl standing in a doorway. The door opened wide behind her. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. She walked forward into light. When I woke up, I felt something I hadn't felt since this began. Peace. But peace doesn't mean the end of consequences. At school, my son started getting questions. Kids noticed his quietness. His seriousness. Some were kind. Some weren't. One day he came home upset. They say I'm weird, he said. I sat with him on the porch steps. Being sensitive in a loud world always looks strange, I told him. But it's not a flaw. He thought about that. I don't want to hear things anymore, he said softly. I just want to be normal. That hurt. Because I knew the world doesn't give us back innocence once it's taken, but it can give us strength. Over time, my son learned how to ground himself. Breathing, routine, trust. And I learned something too. I learned how close I came to losing him. Not to a ghost. To silence. To denial. To my own fear of facing pain that wasn't mine. One afternoon, months later, we received a letter. No return address. Inside was a short note and a photocopy of an old obituary. The note said only this: "Thank you for remembering her." No name. No explanation. I don't know who sent it. Maybe someone who lived here before us. Maybe someone who knew Grace. Or maybe it was just the universe reminding us that truth has a way of circling back. We held a small ceremony in the backyard that evening. No candles. No prayers. Just words. My son spoke. "I hope you're not scared anymore," he said into the air. "I hope someone opens the door for you." I put my hand on his shoulder. And for the first time, I felt like I had done my job as a father. Not by being strong, but by being present. Grace didn't take our family apart. She showed us where it was already cracked. And in doing so, she gave us a chance to fix what mattered most. By the time everything started falling apart, it didn't look dramatic from the outside. That's the part most people never understand. There was no screaming every day. No police at the door. No broken furniture or flying plates. It was quieter than that. And somehow, that made it worse. It began with silence. Not the peaceful kind. Not the kind you feel when the house finally settles at night. This silence felt like something watching us. I noticed it first in the mornings. Our kitchen used to be loud in a gentle way. Coffee brewing. Cabinets opening. My wife humming without knowing she was doing it. My son dragging his feet across the floor, half asleep, asking for cereal he never finished. Then one morning, I walked in and felt like I had stepped into a stranger's home. My wife sat at the table, staring at nothing. My son wasn't there. The coffee machine was cold. I asked, "Where's Ethan?" She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded thin, like it had traveled a long distance just to reach me. "He already ate." That was new. Ethan never ate alone. He waited for us. Always. I didn't argue. I didn't question it. I poured myself coffee and tried to shake the feeling off. But the feeling stayed. It stayed when Ethan started closing his bedroom door. It stayed when he stopped asking me to check his homework. It stayed when he stopped laughing at my dumb jokes. And it stayed when I caught him whispering again. Not just once. Not just twice. Almost every night. At first, I told myself it was normal. Kids talk to themselves. Kids imagine things. Kids cope in strange ways. But this wasn't playful. This wasn't imagination. This was careful. Private. Almost respectful. Like he was afraid of being overheard. One night, I stood in the hallway longer than I should have. The house was dark. The air was still. I could hear the clock ticking from the living room. And then I heard Ethan's voice. Soft. Serious. "I remember," he said. I felt my chest tighten. "Remember what?" "I won't forget," he continued. "I promise." I should have walked away. Every instinct in my body told me to give him privacy. But I stayed. And then I heard a pause. A long one. Like he was listening. Then he nodded. I couldn't see him. But I knew he nodded. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Because kids don't pause for imaginary friends like that. They don't listen that carefully. The next day, my wife told me Ethan's teacher had called. She tried to sound casual about it, but I knew her too well. "He's distracted," she said. "Not paying attention. Drawing strange things in his notebook." "What kind of things?" I asked. She hesitated. "People," she said. "Mostly women." That word landed heavy. Women. Not monsters. Not superheroes. Not animals. Women. I asked to see the drawings. That night, after Ethan went to bed, my wife pulled the notebook from her bag and laid it on the table between us. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The drawings were simple. Pencil lines. No shading. No background. Just a woman. Same woman. Over and over again. Long hair. Gentle eyes. A soft smile. She looked kind. That scared me more than anything. Because she didn't look invented. She looked remembered. I flipped through the pages slowly. Some drawings showed the woman standing alone. Some showed her sitting beside a small boy. In a few, her hand rested on his shoulder. None of them showed her touching his face. That detail stuck with me. I don't know why, but it did. My wife finally spoke. Do you think he saw someone? She asked. Maybe at school. I shook my head. No, I said. This feels older. She didn't like that answer. Neither did I. The days after that felt heavy, like we were all moving through water. Ethan stopped eating dinner with us. He said he wasn't hungry. Then he said he already ate. Then he stopped explaining it all. My wife started staying late at work. I started coming home early, pretending I had nothing else to do. None of us talked about what we were really thinking, because saying it out loud would make it real. One evening, I finally asked Ethan the question I had been avoiding. We were sitting on the couch. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching. Who do you talk to at night? I asked. He didn't flinch. That scared me too. He looked at me calmly, almost sadly. You wouldn't understand, he said. Kids say things like that sometimes. But the way he said it felt final. I might, I replied. You can try. He studied my face, like he was deciding whether I was safe. She doesn't like when I talk about her, he said finally. My throat went dry. Who is she? I asked. He hesitated. Then he said it. Her name is Lila. The name hit me like a memory that didn't belong to me. I don't know why. I asked my wife later if the name meant anything to her. She went pale. No, she said too quickly. That was the first lie I caught between us. Not a big one, but a crack. And once a crack appears, everything starts leaking through. That night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe. I thought about the woman in the drawings, about Ethan's careful voice, about the way my wife avoided my eyes. And for the first time, a thought crossed my mind that made me feel ashamed. What if this wasn't just about our son? What if this was about something buried, something unfinished, something we never talked about because we thought time would erase it? Time doesn't erase things. It hides them, and hidden things always find a way back. There is a point in every family story where pretending stops working. You can still smile. You can still eat together. You can still say good morning and good night. But the pretending becomes heavy. It starts to slow your steps. It sits in your chest. It changes the way you breathe. That's where we were. I could feel it every time I walked into the house. The walls were the same. The furniture was the same. The photos on the shelves hadn't moved. But the air felt crowded, like there was one more person living with us. Someone no one wanted to name. After Ethan told me her name, things moved faster. Not louder, not clearer, just faster. My wife stopped asking questions altogether. That was the first sign she already knew more than she was saying. She didn't ask Ethan who Lila was. She didn't ask me what I thought. She didn't suggest therapy or doctors or counselors. She just watched. Watched Ethan. Watched me. Watched the spaces between us. At night, I noticed her lying awake beside me. Her eyes open, her body still. Sometimes I reached for her hand. Sometimes she held mine. Sometimes she pulled away like she was afraid of waking something up. One night, I finally asked her the question that had been burning a hole in my chest. Do you know who Lila is? I said. She didn't answer right away. She turned her head toward the wall. That silence told me everything. Yes, she whispered. The word felt heavy. Old. Worn. How? I asked. She swallowed. I thought it was over, she said. I thought it was buried. That word again. Buried. I sat up in bed. What was buried? I asked. She didn't look at me. I was younger, she said. Before we met. Before I became who you know. My heart started pounding. I didn't ask about your past, I said. I asked about my son. That made her turn toward me. Her eyes were wet, but steady. That's why it matters, she said. She told me then. Not everything. Not all at once. Just enough to break the ground open. Lila was real. She wasn't imaginary. She wasn't symbolic. She wasn't a name Ethan invented. She was someone my wife had known. Someone she had loved. Someone who had died. Years before Ethan was born. She was my sister, my wife said. The room felt smaller. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked. She shook her head slowly. It hurt too much, she said. And then life kept moving. And then you came. And then Ethan came. And it felt wrong to bring her into something so good. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to feel. I had married a woman with a wound I had never seen. A wound deep enough to stay alive for years without air. How does Ethan know her? I asked. She closed her eyes. I don't know, she said. That's what scares me. That night, sleep didn't come. I kept replaying everything. Ethan's drawings. His careful pauses. The kindness in the woman's face. My wife's silence. I tried to tell myself this was coincidence. That kids pick up stories. That names float around families. That grief leaks in strange ways. But deep down, I knew something else was happening. Something none of us were ready for. The next day, I stayed home from work. I didn't tell anyone. I just felt like if I left, something would happen without me there to see it. Ethan sat at the table drawing again. I sat across from him. "Can I see?" I asked. He slid the paper toward me. It was different this time. Lila wasn't smiling. She looked tired. Older. There were dark lines under her eyes. "What's wrong with her?" I asked softly. Ethan shrugged. "She's getting scared," he said. "Of what?" He looked up at me. "Of being forgotten." That sentence hit me harder than anything before it, because it wasn't something a child should understand. I took a breath. "Why are you talking to her?" I asked. He thought about it. Then he said something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. "Because nobody else will." I didn't speak. I couldn't. He kept going. "She says she waited a long time," he said. "She says she tried to be quiet." My skin prickled. "Try to be quiet where?" I asked. He pointed at the floor. "At home," he said. That night, the house felt different again. Not heavier. Closer. Like whatever had been waiting was tired of waiting. I stood in the hallway outside Ethan's room. His door was open. He was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. "Dad," he said. "Yes," I answered. "She wants to talk to you," he said. My heart stopped. "To me?" I asked. He nodded. "When?" I said. "Tonight," he replied. "If you listen." I wanted to say no. I wanted to laugh it off. I wanted to be the adult. The rational one. The father with answers. Instead, I sat on the edge of his bed and listened, not with my ears, but with the part of me that remembers pain doesn't disappear just because we refuse to look at it. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was scared, but because I felt like something was finally asking to be heard. There's a difference. Fear makes you want to run. This made me want to sit still. The house was quiet in the way it gets just before morning. Not peaceful, just holding its breath. I lay there listening to my wife breathe beside me. Slow, uneven. She was awake too. I could tell. Neither of us spoke. Some conversations don't need words anymore. They live in the space between two people who know something has changed forever. When the sun finally came up, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like permission. At breakfast, Ethan didn't rush. That alone told me everything. He moved carefully, deliberately, like someone preparing for a long walk. He ate slowly. He drank his milk without spilling it. He folded his napkin when he was done. Then he looked at me. "She's ready," he said. My wife froze. I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my voice steady. "Ready for what?" I asked. "To tell you," he said, "but only if you promise not to be mad." That broke something in me, because no child should ever feel like truth is something that deserves punishment. "I promise," I said, "no matter what." He nodded. "She says you don't have to see her," he continued. "Just listen." My wife stood up, so suddenly her chair scraped the floor. "No," she said. "This isn't happening." Ethan looked at her calmly. "She's not here to hurt us," he said. "She's tired." That word again. Tired. My wife's hands were shaking. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said. Ethan's voice stayed gentle. "She says you left too fast," he said. "She says you were scared." The room went silent. I felt like I had just stepped into a moment that didn't belong to me. My wife stared at our son like she was seeing a ghost. "I didn't leave," she whispered. "She died." Ethan shook his head. "That's not how she remembers it," he said. I stood up slowly. "Ethan," I said, "why don't you go to your room for a bit?" He hesitated. "She doesn't want you to fight," he said. "We won't," I promised. That was a lie. But sometimes lies are the only bridge we have. After he left, my wife collapsed into the chair. Her shoulders shook, but no sound came out. I sat across from her. "Talk to me," I said. She covered her face with her hands. "I thought if I never said her name again, she would stay gone," she said. "I thought loving you and loving Ethan would be enough." "What happened?" I asked quietly. She took a long breath. "Lila was my younger sister," she said. "She was different, sensitive, fragile in ways I didn't understand back then." She paused. "We grew up in a house where feelings weren't allowed," she continued. "You survived by staying quiet." I nodded. I knew that house. I grew up in one just like it. She leaned on me. My wife said, "Too much." I was all she had. Her voice cracked. And one day, I told her I couldn't carry her anymore. The words landed heavy. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she said, "I told her to be strong, to stop crying, to stop depending on me." She wiped her eyes. And the next week, she was gone. I felt a cold settle in my stomach. She didn't die naturally, I said. My wife shook her head. She took pills, she whispered. In her room. Alone. The room felt smaller. Did she leave a note? I asked. My wife nodded. She said she felt like a burden, she said. She said she was sorry for being too much. I closed my eyes. Because I had heard those words before. From my own son. I don't want to be a problem, Ethan had said once months ago. I looked at my wife. She thinks you abandoned her, I said. My wife sobbed openly now. I did, she said. I abandoned her when she needed me most. We sat there in that truth for a long time. No defense. No excuses. Just regret. Then Ethan's door opened. He stood there quietly. She's listening, he said. My wife looked at him. Tears streamed down her face. I'm sorry, she said into the air. I was scared. I didn't know how to save you. Ethan tilted his head. She says she doesn't need saving, he said. She just wanted to be missed. Something shifted in the room then. Not dramatic. Not loud. But real. The kind of moment where pain finally finds words. I felt my own eyes burn. Because I realized something terrible. This wasn't about a ghost. This was about grief that never got a voice. And grief, when ignored, doesn't disappear. It finds a child. It finds a crack. It finds a way in. The days after that conversation were different. Not in obvious ways. Not with lights flickering or doors slamming. Just in quiet moments, when the house seemed to exhale. Ethan stopped drawing Lila every night. But sometimes, I'd catch him staring at empty corners. His lips moving like he was speaking softly. Not to me. Not to my wife. To her. I realized then that some lessons don't come with warning. Some grief, some guilt, some secrets, they carry on through other people. Like echoes that refuse to fade. I try to keep normal life going. Work, bills, dinner, sleep. But the normalcy felt fragile. Like a vase that had been cracked long ago and repaired with glue that couldn't hold for long. My wife started staying up late again. But not because she was avoiding sleep. She was writing. Letters, mostly. To Lila. To us. To the past. She wouldn't show me most of them. And I didn't push. Because some things need privacy before they can become peace. One night, I walked into Ethan's room. He was sitting on the floor, knees tucked, notebook open in front of him. Not drawing. Writing. I crouched beside him. What you doing? I asked softly. He didn't look up. Nothing, he said. But his pencil didn't stop moving. Show me, I said. He hesitated. Then he slid the notebook toward me. Inside were pages filled with words. Not stories. Not doodles. Just thoughts, questions, promises. I talked to her here, he said quietly. Not in my head. Here. I felt a lump in my throat. The careful, precise way he was holding on to grief. Trying to understand it. Trying to give it shape without letting it swallow him whole. You're brave, I said. Not because he needed to hear it, but because I did. Later that week, we went outside after dinner. The air was warm, but the sky was bruised purple. Ethan ran to the garden, barefoot, laughing at something invisible. I watched him, really watched, and I noticed for the first time in months how small he still was. How much he had carried in such tiny shoulders. I felt anger rise in me. Not at him, not even at Lila, but at the world. The unfairness of it. The way pain can be passed from one person to another. The way the ones who are supposed to protect often fail in silence. I remember the first time I caught my wife crying alone in the living room. Not for Lila. Not for Ethan. For herself. For all the years she thought she could survive without being honest about loss. She didn't notice me. I just watched her. And I realized something. We were all survivors of the same wound. Ethan with his careful whispers. Me with my fear of not being enough. My wife with her guilt and secrets. And we were learning something together. That grief could be acknowledged, even when it felt like it belonged somewhere else. One afternoon, I found Ethan sitting on the porch, legs dangling, notebook in his lap. Dad, he said softly, I think she wants me to tell you something. My heart skipped a beat. I nodded. Okay, I said. I'm listening. He took a deep breath. Lila says she's sorry, he whispered. I didn't know what to do. Cry? Hug him? Apologize to a ghost? I did none of it. I just held him. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. Not the naive hope of thinking everything would go back to normal. The quiet hope that even in broken houses, broken families, and broken hearts, repair was possible. That night, my wife joined us on the porch. She didn't speak. She just sat. And I knew she was remembering. And grieving. and letting it go, a little. For the first time, I understood what it meant to carry someone's pain with them, not for them. We didn't need words after that. We just sat, the three of us, breathing, watching the night sky stretch over a house that had seen too much. And in the quiet, I realized that the hardest part wasn't the fear. It wasn't the guilt. It wasn't even the whispering. It was learning that healing isn't about fixing everything. It's about staying. It's about listening. It's about being brave enough to feel what's there and not running. And we were learning that. It's strange how life makes you pay attention when you least expect it. The house was quiet again, not in the way that frightened us, not in the way that pressed on your chest, quiet in the way that lets you finally hear yourself. I found myself moving slowly through the rooms, touching corners I'd avoided, opening drawers I hadn't opened in months, not because I was searching for anything, because I realized there were pieces of all of us scattered through the walls, waiting to be seen. Ethan was in his room. His notebook lay open on the floor. Some of the drawings were gone now, some of the words erased, but the ones that remained had a clarity I hadn't noticed before. They weren't just about Lila. They were about fear, about love, about loss, and about holding on to the people you care for, even when it's painful. I watched him from the doorway. He didn't see me. He didn't need to. He was learning the hardest lesson there is, that the past doesn't leave you. You carry it. And the only way to keep moving is to carry it honestly. My wife appeared beside me, quiet as a shadow. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. We just stood there, the three of us connected in silence, in shared understanding, in the acceptance that life can be cruel, but it can also teach you how to survive it with love and tact. Later, Ethan came to me, holding a small envelope. From her, I asked. He shook his head. No, he said. It's for us. Inside were scraps of paper. Not much. Simple words, but heavy with meaning. You are seen. You are loved. You are not alone. I felt my chest tighten. Because sometimes, the smallest words can carry the weight of everything you've been too afraid to say. We placed the notes on the mantel, not as a memorial, not as a reminder of the past, but as a promise that we would listen, that we would stay present, that we would carry each other, even through the darkness. That night, Ethan slept soundly in his own bed. No whispering, no fear, no shadows. My wife and I stayed on the porch, watching the moonlight stretch over the yard. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I didn't say anything. We didn't need to. The house had taught us its hardest lesson. Pain ignored doesn't disappear. It lingers. It grows. It finds a way into the ones you love most. But pain acknowledged. Pain met with honesty and care. That can be transformed. We weren't perfect. We weren't free from mistakes. We weren't healed. But we were moving. Together. And that was enough. The next morning, Ethan asked if we could go to the park. Not a special reason. Not for anyone else. Just to be outside. I held my wife's hand as we walked. And I realized something profound. Sometimes, the most powerful lessons don't come from solving a mystery or fixing what's broken. They come from simply being there. Being present. Being brave. Being willing to face what you fear and love anyway. I had spent so long thinking that I needed to save Ethan. To save my wife. To save myself. But the truth was simpler. All I needed to do was show up. Every day, no matter how heavy it felt. And somehow, that was enough to start healing the cracks that had been there for years. Because love doesn't erase pain. It teaches you how to live with it. And, sometimes, how to pass it forward in a better way. I looked at my son laughing in the sunlight. I looked at my wife smiling. I looked at our home. And I knew, finally, that we had survived the things that could have torn us apart. Not by running. Not by hiding. But by listening. By staying. By being brave enough to face the shadows together. And that was the lesson that would stay with me forever.